U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Good to be with you.
So first, if we could start on Colonial Pipeline. Based on what you're hearing from the company, when will full service be restored?
So all of the indications that we've seen so far are very encouraging. Product is moving, but it moves slowly, about 5 miles an hour in some cases. And so it will take a few days for things to be fully back to normal. And it's one of the reasons why we didn't skip a beat from the very beginning of this through this interim period in making sure that we're supporting other ways to get product to where it needs to be, whether that's over the water, whether that is with trucks, with some of the flexibilities our department's provided to try to ease any of those supply disruptions that may continue for the next few days in that interim period as we get to full normal operations on the pipeline.
State officials have made the point that what's really driven the shortage here is panic buying, right? Is that people thinking there's going to be a shortage, they go out and they're filling up and leading to some of this. I wonder what you say to folks who and understandably might be worried, but what do you say to folks who are going out there filling up, at every opportunity in the midst of this?
Yeah, I certainly understand why there's concern, but my message is don't let this turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are seeing issues where there might not have been issues otherwise because people rushed to the pump and took more than they needed. Of course, if you need to fill up to get to where you're going or to go through your daily routine or get ready for tomorrow, that's normal and that's expected. But you certainly don't need to be hoarding. We have all the supply we need as a country. We have a temporary issue in terms of getting it to where it needs to be. And that's why we're taking these other measures with things like trucks to help compensate while the pipeline's getting back up to speed.
Okay. Infrastructure, of course, an enormous priority for the administration. But what was exposed this week, right, was a vulnerability to cyber attack. And the president has an executive order that involves new regulations for companies who do business with the federal government. But as you know, a lot of our infrastructure is privately run. Do you believe there should be a law requiring private companies to protect themselves, a whole host of measures to prevent this kind of thing from happening again?
Well, I think as a country, we are going to have to take more policy steps. The president issued an executive order that creates new reporting requirements and tightens up a lot of security issues, especially for companies that work with the federal government. But as you point out, so much of the infrastructure in this country is actually not owned and operated by the federal government. Yeah. It's private. After all, this pipeline issue was caused by a cyber attack on a private company. I would add to that a lot of our most important infrastructure is run by local authorities, whether you're talking about a city running a water infrastructure, water utility, or something like a subway system. So we're going to need to do more. And I'll say the American Jobs Plan includes a lot of dollars for resilience, and it's going to include expectations that when we are federally funding a local government, for example, or looking at a plan applying for a grant, we're going to want to know and see that cybersecurity was considered.
Yep. I mean, we always know in cyber attacks, right, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? The weakest way in.
Exactly.
All right. President Biden, they're going to meet with GOP senators this afternoon. As you know, Republicans are they're calling it a red line in terms of raising the corporate tax rate to pay for Biden's infrastructure plan. I wonder, is the Biden administration open to other ways to pay for this, including, for instance, a rise in the gasoline tax? In other words, is that a red line for President Biden, raising the corporate tax rate?
Yeah, the president is not going to support a plan that raises taxes on ordinary Americans, especially when you don't have to in order to fund his vision. The American Jobs Plan is fully paid for, and the president has proposed to fully pay for it just by asking corporations to pay their fair share. It's what most Americans think is the right thing to do, and we think it is. Now, having said that, this is a negotiation, and there may be other ways to get this done that don't cross anyone's red line, and that's exactly the conversation I expect will take place today with Republicans in the Senate, and the kind of conversation that's happening every day over the phone as I'm connecting with members in both houses, the White House and others.
You're saying there could be other ways to get this done. Does that mean you're saying that it does not have to be a corporate tax hike to pay for this?
Well, again, that's the way to do it that we believe makes the most sense. We also think it's just fair to expect corporations to pay their fair share. But yes, this is the right time for those who have alternative proposals on how to pay for us to put those proposals on the table. And to remember that we can't lose focus on the actual need here. We've got a major bridge out of commission. We've been reminded in a very blunt way with the pipeline issues just how important infrastructure is. What we definitely can't afford is to do nothing.
Yeah, and then with this now shutdown of I-40 down there, a highway bridge. So we talked about taxes. I want to talk about overall price tag here because, of course, the Biden plan, close to $2 trillion here. You have Republicans now saying they're willing to come up from their initial $568 billion offer. You've had McConnell and others mention perhaps $800 billion, but that's significantly lower, less than half, right, of where you started here. Is that number, $800 billion or something in that range, a non-starter for President Biden?
Well, it's certainly encouraging to see that movement. We want to understand what's behind that number. Is it apples to apples? What did they envision in terms of what goes to roads and bridges compared to things like lead pipes or broadband internet? But those are the conversations that are happening right now. They're healthy conversations. That's how a negotiation works. And I continue to believe, and I know the president believes, in a bipartisan approach to do everything we can to at least agree on the things that we could do together.
Are you confident that Republicans are negotiating in good faith? That they really would vote or follow through on a bipartisan approach?
Well, at the end of the day, we'll have to see how they decide to vote. But we've absolutely had good faith conversations where there's a lot of goodwill with members in both parties who want to get something done. I mean, the thing I've noticed in talking to House and Senate members from across the country from both parties is everyone here in Washington, in the Congress and the Senate, they're all from somewhere. And they're all going home to districts and going home to states where there are roads that need work, where there are bridges that need improvement, where there are airports that have fallen behind, where people don't have the broadband that they need, where people are afraid of whether they have safe drinking water sometimes because of lead pipes. The need is so clear that if there's any issue in domestic policy where we can have a good faith agreement, I got to think this is that area.
How much time, though? Because we've seen this before. We saw it with COVID relief plans, some back and forth. Maybe they'll come up. They didn't. Ultimately, Democrats and the president went with reconciliation. How long before President Biden says, I tried, I'm going with only Democratic votes?
Well, we can't wait forever. There's a sense of urgency here. And I would say the biggest red line for the president actually is the idea of doing nothing or punting. We've got to act. Each passing year, we are seeing the need build up. This is a safety issue. It's an economic issue. And so there is an expectation that these days and weeks we're in right now need to lead to something, and they need to lead to real action quickly.
We'll be watching Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. We appreciate you joining the broadcast this morning.
Same here. Thanks.
And we'll be right back.